All right, today we're on lesson 28. That is on page 187. So you need to go to 187 in your math book. And you can pause the video at any time if you need to write things down. Today we're going to be working on line plots. So the chart to the right shows the distance fourth graders in Mrs. Smith's class were able to run before stopping for a rest. We're going to create a line plot with the data from the table. So notice one side says student and one side says distance in miles. When we look at the students, you can see they all have a name. And when we look at the distance in miles, you can see there's all kinds of fractions, mixed fractions and just fractions. So when we look at these fractions, we have 2 1/2, 1 3/4, 2 1/8. Notice that the denominators are not all the same. So we have to get all of our denominators to be the same before we can plot our line plot. So when we look at the denominators 2, 4, and 8, we're going to get all of our fractions to equal to 8s. So remember, when we do that, we can use multiplication to get our fraction to equal the same denominator. So when we look at Joe, we're going to think 2 and 1/2. So if I take 1/2 and I times it by a number, I can get it to 8s. So I take 1/2 and I times it by 4 on the top and the bottom, and then I get 4/8. So 1/2 is equal to 4/8. So now Joe has 2 and 4/8. I'm only changing the fraction. I'm leaving the whole number the same. Okay, so if we look at Ariana, Ariana has 1 3/4. I need to get 3/4 to equal to 8s. So if I multiply my 4 times 2, then I can get it to 8. So 3 times 2 is 6. So I now know Ariana has 1 6/8. Bobby is already in 8s. Morgan is already 8s. Jack already is in 8s. So let's look at Sasha. 2 and 1/4. So I need to change my 1/4 so that it equals 8s. So if I times 1/4 by 2, I know I can get to 8. So 1 times 2 is 2. So 1/4 is equal to 2/8. So Sasha now has 2 2/8. Okay, Tyler is also in fourths. Tyler has 2/4. We need to get it to equal 8s. So if we times by a number, we know that we can times it by 2 to get to 8. So 2 times 2 is 4. So instead of having 2/4, he has 4/8. So we're going to put for Tyler 2 4/8. And remember, our whole number stays the same. The rest of them are already in 8s, so we can leave those alone. We don't have to change them. Now on our chart, you can see everyone has the fraction with 8 as the denominator. To make our line plot, we're going to go down to the bottom to give ourselves some space. We're going to draw a long line at the bottom. We have to figure out what is the least and what is the greatest fraction on our chart. When we look at our whole numbers, we know that 2 wholes cannot be the least. But when we look at our fractions with ones, we have 1 6/8, 1 5/8, and just 5/8. Well, because 5/8 on Jenny does not have a whole number, we know 5/8 is going to be our smallest fraction. So now let's look and see what is our largest fraction. So we know 2 wholes is larger, so let's see which one would be the largest. 2 4/8, 2 1/8, 2 5/8, 2 2/8, 2 4/8, 2 2/8, 2 4/8. Well, 2 5/8 is going to be the largest fraction we have. So at the end, we're going to put 2 5/8. Now that we know our smallest and our largest, we're going to just add all the other fractions in between. So if we start at 5/8, then we go to 6/8, 7/8, 8/8 equals 1 whole. So that can also be thought of as 8/8 or 1 whole. Okay, then we have 1 1/8, 1 2/8, 1 3/8. Notice I'm just counting up. 1 4/8, 1 5/8, 1 6/8, 1 7/8. If we have 1 8/8, that makes 2 wholes. So then we have 2 1/8, 2 2/8, 2 3/8, and 2 4/8. Okay, so now we have all of our numbers written out between 5/8 and 2 5/8. So we're going to look up at our chart first. We look at Joe. Joe has 2 4/8. So we're going to go down to our line plot and find 2 4/8, and we're going to put an X above that. Make sure you are putting an X on that. Okay, I'm going to cross off Joe so I remember I already put his on the chart. Ariana had 1 6/8, so I'm going to find 1 6/8 on my line plot, and I'm going to put an X above it. It should only be an X. And then I'm going to cross off Ariana. I'm going to look at Bobby. Bobby has 2 1/8. So I go to my chart, I find 2 1/8, and I put an X. And then I'm going to cross out Bobby. I look at Morgan. Morgan has 1 5/8. So I find 1 5/8. I put an X. And then I'm going to cross out Morgan's. Next, I'm going to look at Jack. Jack has 2 5/8. So I find 2 5/8 on my line plot. I put an X. And then I cross out Jack. Now I'm going to go to Sasha. Sasha has 2 2/8. So I find where 2 2/8 is. I put an X. And I cross out Sasha. I'm going to look at Tyler. Tyler has 2 4/8. So I find 2 4/8. We already have an X there, so I put another X on top of it. And then I can cross out Tyler. I look at Jenny, and Jenny had 5/8. So I find 5/8, and I put an X. And now I can cross out Jenny. Anson had 2 2/8. So I find 2 2/8. I already have an X there, so I just put another X on top. And now I can cross out Anson. The last one is Chandra. Chandra has 2 4/8. So I find my 2 4/8. It already has 2 x's there, so I put a third x on top of it. And then I cross out Chandra. Now my line plot is complete, so I can use my line plot to help answer questions. So I want you to turn the page. We're going to do an example. So if I had the question on 2A, who ran a mile further than Jenny? Okay, so if I look at Jenny's score, I know that Jenny ran 5/8. So a mile further than that would be 1 more, so 1 5/8. So on my chart, a mile further would be 1 5/8. So who ran 1 5/8? If I look at my chart, I can see that Morgan ran 1 5/8. So on my question, I can say that Morgan ran a mile further than Jenny. On B, it says who ran a mile less than Jack. So I'm going to go back to my chart, and I'm going to figure out where Jack is. So I look at my chart, and Jack is 2 5/8. So I look at 2 5/8. It said a mile less. So if I take 1 away from 2 5/8, then I would have 1 5/8. And when I looked at my chart, who had 1 5/8? It was Morgan. So again, my answer would be Morgan. Okay, so using your chart and your line plot to help you answer questions. You will be doing this on an exit ticket later on. So now, if you are finished with this, and it's in your book written just like mine, you're working on Zern, lesson 28. Make sure you are on lesson 28. It could be a bookmark lesson, so double check that. And make sure you're working on watching the math video and your Zern notebook. If you don't finish it today, you should be working at home tonight.